Hello, and welcome to episode number 53 of Wrestlerotica, the podcast that combines erotica and wrestling. This week we have two stories to share with you. The first story is entitled, The Podcast. After recording an episode of the Stone Cold podcast, Austin can't help but to reveal his true feelings for the Nature Boy Ric Flair. The second story is entitled, Anything for the Title. After recently finding out about the affair that Triple H was having with Stephanie McMahon, Chyna has decided to leave the WWF. She is unwilling to drop her title though, so Vince McMahon begs Trish Stratus to try to appeal to Chyna. Trish does her best to win over Chyna any way that she can, because she wants to be the next champion. Without further ado, let's get to this week's stories. This story is entitled, The Podcast, and it was written by fanfiction.net user, Old School Fan. Dip in the lip. Well, I'll be damned. I never took Ric Flair for the dipping kind. He casually pulls it out before we start recording the podcast. It puts me at ease. He informs me when he sees me eyeing the skull. Sure, whatever you need, I say. And we have plenty of beer. He smiles, and for some reason, I find myself blushing. I look away quickly to my audio guy. Hey Mo, you ready yet? Yes sir, he says. So I proceed to introduce Ric Flair to my listening audience. Woo! I inform them that we are indeed coming to them from Ric's hotel room. I'm nervous as hell being in the same room with the guy I had admired since before I broke into the business. But as this thing proceeds, I start to relax a bit. It doesn't feel like an interview anymore, more like a friendly conversation, and an engrossing one at that. I find myself watching him with more interest than I ought to. I start to notice the little things. The way his eyes light up and dance mischievously when he tells a story. The movement of his mouth. The way he tilts his head. That little flap of skin at his neck that moves when he talks. I wonder if anyone's ever nibbled on it. I shake my head. Now you're thinking about the old man's neck. Snap out of it, Steve. I reach for a beer, press the can to my flaming face before popping it open. Ric's watching me with a little smirk on his lips. That guy doesn't miss a thing. I start thinking of a way to end our little chat without seeming to erupt. When the podcast is finished, I go to shake Ric's hand and thank him again for his time. Instead of shaking my hand, he pulls me into a hug, pressing his warm body against mine, his lips at my ear. Get rid of Andre Agassi over there, he whispers hotly, and I'll give you what you really came for. I look over at Mo, who does in fact look like Andre Agassi. Mo! Ric and I have some more things to discuss. Why don't you get going? I'll catch up to you later. He nods, gathers up his equipment, scurries toward the door, but stops long enough to stammer. It was an honor to meet you, Mr. Flair. Of course it was, kid. I'm the one and only Ric Flair. Woo! You don't do humble well, do you? I chuckle once Mo is gone. He's cute, Ric says approvingly, then takes a swig of beer. I see why you have him around, and to answer your question, it's hard to be humble when you're Ric Flair. You can drop the act. There are no cameras here. No public. Just you and me. Now, Ric, I want to know what you meant by that little comment. You're going to give me what I really came here for? It was just talk, Steve. That's all. He examines his manicured nails as if bored. Now, if you will excuse me, I'm meeting the boys for drinks. I want to know what you meant. He raises a plucked eyebrow. What do you want it to mean? He has the upper hand and he knows it. He's playing with me, trying to get me to admit to things. Never mind. I don't care what you meant. I'm out of here. I make for the door, wanting to put an end to what's quickly turning into a humiliating experience. I feel a soft hand gripping my arm. He turns me around. A long time ago, Steve, you said there was something about the way I looked that made you a fan. Are you still a fan? He's biting his lip, something he does when he's nervous. I look over him in the harsh, unforgiving glare of the hotel room lighting. He looks away. I used to have a lot of fans, he says wistfully. Of course, I was young and beautiful then. It's okay if you're not a fan anymore. Are you kidding me? I cup his chin and force him to look at me. I'm probably the biggest goddamn Ric Flair fan there is. To make a long story short, we start going at it hot and heavy. I get to taste that neck and other parts of him. He's on his belly, face buried in the pillow, pumped behind in the air, and I get to licking him back there, flicking my tongue over his rosebud.
Don't be a lemon, be a rosebud!
Pushing it inside of him. He's squirming, moaning, white-knuckled grip on the sheets. I get him nice and ready, lube myself up, flip him onto his back, and go deep. A cell phone rings. We ignore it. The bed is rocking. Then Mo comes knocking, despite the do not disturb sign on the door. I think I left my phone! He calls from outside the door. Did you hear it ring? Make him go away! Rick pants. Tough shit! I holler back at Mo. We're busy! Come back later! Rick's legs are wrapped around my waist. He's grinding himself against my cock, as if he can't get enough of it inside of him, while shrilly screaming my name and demanding that I fuck him harder. I have to remember to gag him next time. We collapse, sweaty and sated. I stroke his thigh. He looks at me with questioning eyes. Did you? Yeah! I respond, pulling him to me and kissing his worried brow. I got what I came for. The end. This story is entitled Anything for the Title, and it was written by WOWEFA user Cerberus Brent M Denny. Judgment Day was a matter of weeks away, and everybody knew that Chyna, aka Joni Lawler's last match was going to be at Judgment Day against Lita for the women's title, which Chyna held, and rumor had it she wasn't going to drop at Judgment Day to Lita, which raised the question, what was going to happen to the women's title when Joni left? After a Raw show, Trish Stratus was in her locker room, finishing off getting dressed back into her normal clothes by tying up her shoes, when there was a knock on the door. Come in! It's open! The Canadian beauty called out in her sexy, sweet voice. The door then opened, and in walked WWE owner and former on-screen love interest of Trish's, Vince McMahon.
No chance, that's what you got. Up against a machine too strong. Pretty politicians buying souls for us song puppets.
Hey, Trish! Vince said, as he entered the room, closing the door behind himself. Listen, Trish, we've got ourselves a bit of a problem. Trish stood motionless, curious as to what concerns Vince would bring to her. As you know, Joni's going to be leaving after Judgment Day. The problem is that she's still got quite a bit of clout backstage, and has already flatly refused to drop the title. Now, the last thing I need is another Montreal controversy.
I truly believe that Bret Hart screwed Bret Hart.
And so it seems, My only option at this point is to suspend the women's title at this point until a suitable tournament can be started to reestablish the belt. Trish's heart sunk. She knew the title was the pinnacle of female success in the WWE, and this would prolong her lifelong dream even further. Of course! Vince then said, which raised Trish's spirits a little. Joni is offering an alternative. Vince then said, and that is? Trish asked. If a WWE diva can convince her that she is worthy of the women's title, then she would be willing to win Judgment Day. But that diva would be guaranteed, when the tournament is over, to be crowned women's champion. Have any divas tried to convince her yet? Trish asked. Not yet. She only said this earlier today. And in all honesty, Trish, I can't think of a better woman to not exactly replace Chyna, but to carry the women's title after her other than you. Damn! Vince said. So, if you could convince her to drop the title to you, not only would you have the women's title, but I'd owe you big time. Trish thought about it for a moment. She had to weigh her options here. But then, when she looked at it in retrospect, what did she have to lose? All she had to do was persuade Joni. Just a friendly talk. By looking at it in that light, she felt a calm aura surround her. She perked up before looking back at her employer. Sure, Vince. I'll give it my best. Vince smiled back at her. Great. Remember, this is important to both your career and the stability of the WWF. Please convince her by any means necessary. And so, with that having been said, Vince left Trish's locker room. Trish packed up her stuff, and then, on her way to her limo to the hotel, she called Joni's mobile and got Joni's voicemail. Hi, this is Joni Lawler. I'm currently engaged at the moment, but please leave a message after the beep. Trish then left her message. Hi, Joni. It's the Queen of Stratusfaction here. Listen, Vince has told me about your little alternative to not refusing to drop the woman's title. Listen, when you get this message, call me so we can arrange a time and place to meet. Bye, Chai. And with that, Trish hung up. Trish then went to her hotel, dropped off her stuff in her hotel room, and then went down to the bar. And it wasn't long before the person Joni had tried to contact walked over and sat down opposite Trish. I got your message. Is it okay if we chat now? Joni asked, not wanting to disturb Trish's free time. Sure. Trish smiled cheerfully at the tall Amazonian beauty. But first, did you want a drink? Joni smiled. Actually, I'd love one. There's only so many hours of a photo shoot that I can take before I need a good, stiff drink. Trish laughed. Yeah, I know all about that. Trust me. And so the two of them had a few shots. The couple of minutes turned into a good 90 minutes of talking and laughing. They were both a little tipsy when Joni glanced at her watch. Oh, Christ! I have to get to bed. I've got another shoot at 6 a.m. tomorrow. She started away when Trish gripped her arm. We've spent all this time chatting, and yet we haven't been chatting about the reason I wanted us to meet, Trish said with a sudden realization of the time they had partly wasted, and yet not wasted at the same time. Well, we could always wait until tomorrow, or, if you wanted, we could always go up to my hotel room and continue our conversation up there. Joni suggested and offered. Trish obliged. It was early Tuesday morning, and the plan for the next house show didn't leave until late that night. She graciously accepted, and the two headed up to Chyna's room. "Do you mind if I change?" she asked Trish. Trish didn't mind, considering she said she had to get to bed anyway. She assumed this was normal. "Go ahead and propose what you wanted about the title," Trish started. "Well, as you know, we need someone to be champion when you're gone. Vince and I both feel I'd be most qualified. After all, I've improved above all the other divas. I'm marketable, sexy, oh yeah, and competent in the ring," Chyna retorted from her bedroom. "That's all well and good, hun, but the problem is, you just need to look at yourself, then look at me. I'm almost a foot taller than you. I've got about 30 pounds of muscle on you and have beaten guys. I think it'd be insulting to our fans' intelligence to watch you beat me clean." Trish frowned. "Vince told me you'd be willing to win JD, Judgment Day, against Amy, Lita, and then the title would be retired for a few months, and then there would be a sort of elimination match, and the diva you felt worthy of having the title would win the elimination match, or whatever type of match it was," Trish told Joni. "That's very true," mentioned Joni. "But I was thinking of more legitimate athletes. Jacqueline would make a good one, as would that Molly Holly character they're doing. I might even let Lita have it. That way I can come back and set up a big return match if I want." Trish grew a bit offended by this, naturally. "Now, hold on! I've been working my ass off down in OVW, trying to be the best I can be. Vince has seen it. The other girls do too. If you can't, then you're..." Joni walked out of the bathroom she was changing in. She was clad in a tiny robe that made it apparent she wasn't wearing any bra, and underwear so small it had to be a G-string. Trish stopped suddenly, taken aback by the sheer beauty of the woman. "Hey, cool down," Joni said. "I know how hard you've been working, but Trish, you've got to understand, you've spent a good part of your WWE career managing and being in non-physical angles. It's only been recently have you actually become more of a physical wrestler, and not just, pardon the expression, angle eye candy," Joni said, sitting on the bed and taking the hairbrush and offering it to Trish. "Care to do my hair for me?" Trish obliged, grabbed a brush, and ran it down through Joni's flowing, raven-colored locks. Trish continued, "Yes! But now I'm ready! I've been training, and all I need now is an open forum, where I can show the world, and even you, if you let me, that I'm ready to evolve to an actual competitor." Joni smiled as she loved the feel of Trish brushing her hair. She also loved how close the two of them were now, since the whole Paul and Stephanie shit happened, which truth be known as the real reason Joni was leaving. Joni had decided, with what Paul did and all the other asshole boyfriend she decided she might try a little of that same-sex stuff, after people do say, nobody can touch a woman like another woman, and Joni decided to find out if this was true. Only problem was, she was nervous about when would be a good place and time, and finding the right person to help her find out if this was true. Joni knew she couldn't just blurt it out, or just say it in an offer type of way, so she decided to kind of like mix business with what she hoped would turn out to be pleasure. Of course she knew she'd have to also give a reason for her wanting to do this. Joni took a deep breath, and then began her attempt to get Trish into bed. "Trish, has anybody actually told you The reason why I'm leaving the WWF? Joni asked. Can't say they have. I don't like to pry into things that are none of my business. Joni pushed. Triple Paul's been having an affair with Stephanie for about 4 months now. It's weird I'm telling you this. It must be the alcohol. I guess it's that, well, I always needed a friend to cry to, but with Stephanie and Paul having such run over the company, I couldn't turn to anyone. She continued professing until she got it all out. Trish didn't know what to say, so she embraced Joni. She didn't know how alone she was. I read a few newspapers who had written articles on it, but I figured they were just shit shifters, meaning people trying to stir trouble. No, Joni said. The articles are true, and that is the real reason why I'm leaving. Although, of course, to say both me and Vince having to face a load of interviews and pesky reporters, which I no doubt expect we're both going to have to face anyway. We're using a cover story about me, and the WWE not agreeing to my renewal of contract. Trish then pondered this. So, if this Paul and Stephanie thing hadn't come out, or you hadn't found out about it, you'd be staying? Joni nodded. Will you ever come back? Trish then asked. Joni smiled. When all the bullshit's blown over, and after I've tried my hand at a few other things, if they don't work out, I might come back for another 6 years. Or if they do, I might become a female McFoley. Just do special appearances now and then. Joni told her Canadian blonde, feeling like this was going good so far. She was opening up to Trish, and in her own way, Trish was opening up to Joni. Now Joni was ready to make her move. Naturally, after all of this, I thought about relationships. Are they worth it? Who do I want? Even what I wanted anymore. And I started to think of the guys that I knew. Just a bunch of jocks. One hollow as the next. But the girls have always been kind, passionate, and talkative. I could come to them with anything, and they'd be there for me. I just don't know what that makes me. I can't tell where my feelings or my own sexuality lie anymore. Trish smiled a half smile. You know, Joni, despite us being friends, I always felt you and me were two very different. But now, I can see we have more in common than not in common. Trish said, trying her best in her own way, let Joni know she wasn't alone in the way she felt for Trish, had also been experiencing trouble trying to figure out where her sexuality and everything else laid. Only for Trish, her conflict had lasted more than a few months, unlike Joni's. What? With men cheating on us? Joni asked, clearly playing the naive one. No, with considering women the better sex. Trish replied, I just see women as so much better partners, not just sexually than men could ever be. I mean, I've never really had a female partner all the way, but I've had long, meaningful conversations with them. More important than anything any man ever tried to get out. Joni figured enough beating around the bush now. It was time to go in for the kill. Maybe we should put our conflicts to rest, Joni said, sounding as nervous as she was feeling. Maybe. And we don't have to, if you don't want to. But maybe you and me could. You know? Joni said, afraid of saying the actual words. She didn't have to. Trish put the brush down and kissed the back of Joni's neck. Joni let out a soft coo as she didn't see it, only felt the sudden rush sending a tingling sensation through her neck. She worked over Joni's neck long enough before climbing up to her face and engaging in a full lip lock. The kiss began as a closed-mouth one, but as the two women got more turned on and more adventurous, Joni was the first to open her mouth, and pretty soon the two were lip-locked and French kissing each other as Joni took off her robe to reveal her breast and the smallest and skin-tight thong ever to Trish, as Joni laid down on the bed and pulled Trish on top of her. Trish planted a full French kiss on the tan goddess, running her hands up the sides of her body. Joni was taken back by the sudden aggression in Trish. The small blonde was quite fiery when it came to fits of passion. Trish sat up straight and removed her own shirt, revealing a lacy lavender bra that Joni couldn't help but admire. She ran her strong hands up and gave each of Trish's breasts a firm squeeze, making her lightly moan with pleasure. Joni then moved her hands around the lavender bra to the strap behind and unclasped it. As the bra fell to the floor, Joni raised herself into Trish's breast and took one into her mouth and began to gently suck and bite and lick it, giving it her full attention, while Trish's other breast got the full attention of Joni's hand. Trish's moans got louder as Joni continued to work over her delicious breast. This only encouraged Joni to work her over further, to drive the petite blonde to complete ecstasy. She was doing just that when she was pushed away, landing, bouncing on the bed. Trish leaned down and kissed her neck once again, obviously desiring to take charge. Joni was not one to complain and let Trish do what she will with her body. Trish made a path of kisses down to Joni's breast and began to do what Joni had done to her. She took a breast into her mouth and sucked on it, licked the nipple, and bit on it, while her hand took care of the other breast. However, she didn't spend as much time on one breast as Joni had, and as soon as the breast was satisfied, Trish moved on to the other breast, and then moved on down Joni's body. Trish worked her abdomen. Oh, that famous hard body belly, flat yet curvaceous, tasted wonderful in her mouth, and her tongue felt just as good to Joni, according to the rising moans. Once she was done there, she moved down to her hips, kissing along the thin string of her thong. As tiny as this G-string was, Trish desired to see its full effect. As such, she commanded Joni to roll over, who did just that. That ass looked so sweet, clothed in barely there crimson silk. She took her tongue and started licking from the back of her calf, all the way up to the thighs, and even on the ass she admired of Joni. Joni just shuddered and moaned at the new, experimental sensations she was feeling. When Trish was content with her backside, Joni had turned around, flat on her back. Trish then decided to see how wet she was making Joni, without actually tasting Joni, and with that Trish began to lick the actual thong that was dry until she got to the heart of the thong and the heart of Joni's pussy, and then the thong felt and smelled of a woman's horniness. Trish was shocked at how horny Joni was getting, and figured enough teasing, and with that she forced the thong all the way off of Joni's body, and then got to work, as she attacked Joni's pussy, intent on giving Joni 100% satisfaction, and also intent on when she had given, she would receive it back. Trish ran her tongue all the way around the lips of Joni's womanhood, causing her moans to grow low and her entire body to quake. She flicked her tongue in rapid sensation over a variety of locations, causing Joni to breathe faster and faster, grabbing her own breast to continue her pleasure. Finally, Trish hit the clit, sending Joni to the brink of passing out from sheer excitement. To keep the energy growing, Trish took her hand and put 2 fingers into Joni's moistened box. The constant thrusting of the well-lubed fingers and the skillful thrust of her tongue caused Joni to feel an orgasm coming. Oh, Trish! Don't stop! Oh, baby! Please! Don't stop giving me satisfaction! I can feel it, sweetie! I'm close to coming! Please don't stop! Joni said over and over again. It was obvious to Trish that they had both turned a corner in their lives. They may not have been full-blown lesbians, but both Joni and Trish obviously liked women as much, if not more so, for the moment at least, than they liked men. And Trish had no intention of stopping. If anything, Joni's pleas spurred Trish on. Joni's moans seemed to grow louder with each swoop Trish's tongue made.
Oh!
Finally, she let out an all-encompassing "Oh!" as she reached the peak of her orgasm that launched wave after wave of bodily fluids at Trish. She drank down the sweet nectar happily. As convulsions ripped through her, causing her to jerk from pure pleasure. Once she had finished feasting on Joni's love juices and love box, Trish lay down next to Joni on the king-size bed and said, "Right time to show me what the ninth wonder of the world can do now that I've given you 100% stratisfaction," Trish said with a smile. Joni then sat up and got into a good position to begin her pleasuring of Trish's body. "Before I do, I just want to let you know of one thing. Whatever the match is for the women's title in a few months," Joni said. Trish nodded. "You're gonna win it, and you're gonna be the next women's champion," Joni said, smiling from ear to ear, as was Trish. Now that Trish knew that, she pulled down Joni, who met her in another deep French kiss. Joni had already gotten a good taste of Trish's breast, so she decided to get to the point. She reached one of her hands down to Trish's tight leather pants and started rubbing rather violently. The harsh friction mixed both pleasure and pain, and a sensation that completely overwhelmed her blonde partner. Healthy-sized moans escaped their kiss as Trish's cunt felt hotter and wetter. Joni then moved the other hand down to join, and as Joni started to kiss with as much ferociousness as she had been massaging Trish's covered-up pussy, Joni's hands began to undo the zip and buttons on the pants, and took them down, exposing Trish's own thong, which Joni ripped off literally, and immediately began to finger-fuck Trish, who was soaking, not as soaking as Joni had been, but good enough for Joni's fingers to slide in and out. Joni was huge for a woman, as the world knows, and with her two fingers pumping through Trish, she honestly couldn't tell the difference between her fingers and a man. "Oh! Oh! Keep going! Please! More!" Trish begged. Whether she meant this literally or not didn't matter to Joni, who decided to take a third finger and insert it, seamlessly joining in. This new finger began to rub the top of Trish's clit, causing her to nearly scream rather than moan. Joni didn't know if Trish was gonna try men again, but one thing was for sure. She sure as hell wasn't woman were much more to her liking tonight was a new beginning in a sense. It was the end of her WWF career, and yet at the same time, the beginning of Joni's life as a lesbian. Joni loved hearing Trish moan as all three of Joni's fingers worked together on Trish's clit. Joni could tell solely by Trish's moans that she was close. To help her along the way, she reached up with her free hand and tweaked one of Trish's nipples, driving Trish even wilder, which was thought impossible to her. But sure enough, after another 30 seconds of this, an orgasm, then another shot through Trish Stratus. She jerked violently with each wave of pleasure, letting out all her affection as well as her juices. When she was done, Joni craned down to lick the sweet-tasting substance up. Joni then had an idea, but before she did it, or told it to Trish, she simply laid down and took Trish into her arms, as Trish got over her amazing orgasms. "That was unfucking believable, Joni," Trish said as her heart rate and breathing slowly got back to normal. Joni smiled. "We haven't finished yet," Joni said. Trish looked at her. "When you get your breath, we're gonna finish up with something that'll help us both come at the same time," Joni said with a smile. Trish could barely comprehend that thought. If their orgasms were powerful enough, how on earth could she cope with her reaching a climax at the same time as her lover? Trish was already feeling in the mood, just thinking about the thought. But first, they just sensually kissed for a while, tongue swirling slowly back and forth. Then, when Joni and Trish were both ready, Joni moved down to the other end of the bed. "Turn onto your side," Joni instructed, and Trish obeyed. "Lift one leg into the air," Joni instructed. Trish obeyed, and then Joni moved herself into position and began rubbing her pussy up against Trish's. Neither woman could imagine the complete erotic pleasure this move could give them. While it robbed them of precious energy, the adrenaline they got from the friction encouraged them to continue. Their moans simultaneously grew.
"Oh, yeah. Oh."
As every inch of pleasure was shared between them. They continued to rub their pussies together, both moaning and groaning, both loving the pleasure they were receiving, and giving the other, and both quickly feeling the beginning of their orgasms. It was then that Trish decided that Joni had showed her enough, and that she was ready to prove just how tough she was. She removed her legs and kept Joni laying down. She mounted her and lifted her leg up, driving her pussy deep into Joni's, who, with Trish sitting on her leg, could do nothing but receive the pleasure Trish was driving into her womanhood. "Oh! Fuck me, Trish! Keep it up! Oh, God! Show me you deserve to be the women's champion! Keep going, baby! Don't stop! Give me more satisfaction!" Joni cried in sheer ecstasy as she tried her best to keep up with Trish, but was finding it hard too. But, by some miracle, managed it. And then, Trish and Joni couldn't hold it in anymore, as they both felt their orgasms reach their peak, and ultimately take over both of their bodies. With simultaneous exhausted groans, they shot through their bodies, one small, the other large. However, just as they hit, their clits both found one another, and in that instance, a second orgasm shot through both of them. Just as they were collapsing, their bodies forced even more pleasure on them. Finally, it ended. Their bodies had no more to give. Joni then literally, totally sexually satisfied, as well as devoid of any energy, crawled back up to the end Trish was at, and laid down next to her, and reached over and wrapped her arms around Trish, and then decided to find out. "How has tonight's events made you feel about your conflict?" Joni asked. The way she was talking proved she had given Trish all she had to give. Trish replied, not even looking back at her. "I gave you my all tonight. That's what I'll give in the ring." Joni smiled. "Well, if that's what you're giving the fans, they won't be able to walk for at least an hour." Joni hesitated. "And what happens to us?" Trish snuggled closer and simply stated, "What men?" Joni then kissed Trish's forehead, and the two divas fell fast asleep in each other's arms, having ended one and other's conflict, and been happy with how their conflict ended. The end. Thank you for listening to episode number 53 of Wrestlerotica. We hope that you enjoyed this week's stories. If you enjoyed this week's stories, please be sure to like and review us on iTunes, as this helps us out tremendously. Visit us elsewhere online, including Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, Tumblr, and as always, our official website, WrestleRoticaPod.com. Thank you and have a good week.